Welcome back to InfoSec World 2024. Cyber Risk TV is streaming live from the expo floor in sunny Lake Buena Vista, Florida. We're excited to be here celebrating the 30th anniversary of InfoSec World. I'm your host, Mandy Logan, and today I'm joined by Brian Contos, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Sevco Security. And today we're talking about vulnerability and exposure management. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Mandy. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad. Have you had a wonderful conference so far?
It's been a great conference. I didn't realize it was the 30-year anniversary until earlier this morning. I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
I agree. It wasn't until registration when I got the little pin that said 30 years, and I go, oh, wow, that had not sunk in.
Wait, you got a pin?
I got a pin. I got a very fancy
it must be
lapel.
nice, Mandy. Must be nice. Be a VIP.
But I didn't get a red pocket square.
Okay, yes, of course. Winner.
Exactly. So let's get into something super serious here now, right? Vulnerability and exposure management. Will you please give me a quick rundown of maybe a summary of how and why you feel that Sevco's approach is exceedingly beneficial to all of our listeners today?
Yeah. You know, Mandy, when Sevco started, we were an asset intelligence company. Some people might call it CASM. And we really focused on discovering, correlating, deduplicating, analyzing asset intelligence. And it was great. And a lot of customers, that's still a really key use case. But very quickly they said, hey, you know what, could you start adding CVE data into this and maybe correlating from different CVE sources and have a sort of aggregation of both asset intelligence, vulnerability, and exposure information in one prioritized sort of pane of glass. And that has taken off like wildfire. And I can't tell you, we did a keynote earlier this morning, and just the amount of people that came up and said, I've been looking for this for years. I had no idea this was even an option. So it's great to sort of find that itch that we were able to scratch with that solution.
That is brilliant. And how did the keynote go?
I thought the keynote went really well. I think we had roughly about 1,000 people there, which was fantastic. And just based on the number of people that came to our booth afterwards and kind of came up to ask questions, I think our message resonated.
Beautiful. So where do you see from perhaps your customers or just from being in the industry so long, where are organizations collecting their vulnerability information today?
You know what's funny? If you would have asked me this question even just a few years ago, not like 20 years ago, but 3 or 4 years ago, so they get it from vulnerability scanners. And there's a lot of great vulnerability scanners out there. There's Qualys, there's Rapid7, there's Tenable, and many others, and there's open source as well. And most people still think that. However, today, most organizations are getting CVE and vulnerability information from a minimum of 6 sources. It could be their EDR, like CrowdStrike, patch management, like Automox, could be Amazon, Jamf on the application side, and about 1,000 other sources in between that. And what we're finding is these solutions that are, they have agents on the endpoint or other cloud integration capabilities, they give you really rich CVE information. Sometimes, I would say even better than what you get from an external vulnerability scanner. So now a lot of organizations are starting to wonder, do I still need a vulnerability scanner at this point? Or can I just get it from all these other sources of CVEs and correlate it? Now, I would argue that, you know, you have digital printers and door locks, and if you're a critical infrastructure company, maybe SCADA devices, there's no EDR, there's no patch management running on those things. Also, what if you have some devices that are missing endpoint controls? In that case, I think the vulnerability scanners really help address those edge cases and fill in those gaps. But in general, you're getting a lot of great CVE information from non-scanner sources these days.
Oh, interesting. Do you feel like that has impacted then the ability of an organization to really, instead of going by perhaps an accepted, more generalized severity score of the vulnerability, how does the organization then get one that actually is applicable to them?
Yeah, and that's the whole notion of prioritization is a really, really hot topic right now. For example, in the CVE world, there's what's called CVSS scores. 10's really bad, 1's not bad at all. But if I have a 10 and I have a 5, prudence dictates that I probably address the 10 first. However, that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
Because the 5 might have, and again, let's pull from the asset intelligence side that's correlated with that, oh, it's got an EDR. and it's up to date, and it's communicated with the management console within the last few weeks, and it's in prevention mode, not just detection mode, and it's also got patch management and all these other variables. So the 10's actually looking pretty strong, even though it's got this vulnerability. Where the one that has a CVS score of 5, maybe it's may, maybe it's missing an EDR, right? Maybe the patch management hasn't communicated in the last 6 months. And then we start adding business context to this as well. By the way, that 5 is part of a mission critical process, where the 10 is maybe a
Right.
lab machine, right?
Right.
So we can start pushing these things together in real time and say, this is my priority. This is a severity score of critical, juxtaposed to a severity score of maybe medium.
So, what is your definition of a small, medium, or large organization? Just real quick, like what would you?
Yeah, so for us, we primarily focus on large enterprise and government institutions.
Okay.
So I would say the Fortune 500, Global 2000s are primary, but also mid-sized organizations, maybe that 5,000-esque type role.
Okay.
We actually do work with a lot of smaller organizations as well, but that's generally through our MSSP partners when they
Fair.
say, look, we don't have tens of thousands of assets, and we don't have, a half a dozen sources of CVEs, but we still have a few hundred or maybe 1,000 that we'd like to control, like to manage those. Then we work through our MSSP partners on those smaller customers.
Oh, brilliant! And I do love the role that MSSPs play. Like I really adore the rise of strong MSSP.
Yeah.
And then if you were looking at it being a mid-size, and obviously we're going for more large size and governmental
Yeah.
institutions, do you categorize that by the number of humans in the organization or the number of assets?
Yeah. So generally speaking, when we're looking at what's a large organization, those two go hand in hand, the number of assets and the number of people, generally
Okay.
speaking. We do have some customers with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of assets, and we have some that are still considered, very large companies that might only have 20, 30, 40,000 assets. So
Right.
it's not always a direct correlation, but it's roughly in that ballpark.
Beautiful. With Sevco and the solutions and integration abilities brought, how does remediation play into what information is provided?
I'm glad you asked because remediation might be one of my favorite capabilities within Sevco. We actually call it automated remediation validation. So what does that mean?
Automated remediation validation.
So back in the day, you'd scan for a bunch of vulnerabilities, and here's a list of IP addresses, and here's the related vulnerabilities. And now we're adding all the asset intelligence to that as well. Do you have or do you not have your EDR? Is patch management up to date or is it not? So you have this other context. Well, there's always been kind of this gap of here's a bunch of issues, and then I give it over to IT or some other group to address them, and then come back 6 months to look at it again. It's still the same issues. They haven't been resolved, so I just changed the date on the report. So I
Right.
love that we have this automated remediation validation. So again, what does that mean? So within Sevco, when you discover an issue, that's automatically sent up to your SIM or your ticketing or your CMDB or store capability to actually remediate that. And in real time, because of our API capabilities, we can see if this thing has been updated, if EDR has been applied, if that CVE has been removed, right? And you can track that in real time. And I can say, oh, I had 1,000 issues. I handed it over to the team to address them. And I can see in real time, now we're down to 100 issues, right? And that's pretty great. And say, okay, now I want to have metrics on top of this as well. Did it take us 24 hours to address those? Did it take us 2 weeks? Did it take us 3 months? What's good, what's bad, and how can we improve? Across talent, techniques, and technology, not just the pieces of software that we have analyzing this.
Do you have a perhaps anecdotal, but also just a case information from a company who has implemented Sevco successfully, especially about the remediation?
Yeah.
Do you have a quick story you can share with us?
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting stories is relatively timely. We all know there was some issues with CrowdStrike a couple months ago. A great number of our customers are also CrowdStrike customers, and it's a great EDR. We're great partners with CrowdStrike. What they found with the automated remediation, just the pure asset tracking and the exposure and vulnerability management, they could very quickly ascertain, give me a list of all my assets. Now tell me all those assets that are mission critical. Now all those assets that are mission critical that might have an issue with CrowdStrike. And now as those devices are being updated, also track how that's changing in real time. So you could get this within CrowdStrike itself and pull that information out. But now you're also saying, well, CrowdStrike plus Automox plus Lumio plus what Tenable is telling me and all these other sources now deduplicated and correlated into one pane of glass. it just made the process that much cleaner and that much easier for the engineers to get through and track it. And then most of all, they're able to tell their bosses, the executive team or maybe the board, this is the state of the state. We have evidence-based data about where we are, where the problem was, and how long it took us to solve it. It's not assumption-based anymore. We've got facts. And you weren't able to do that before Sevco. It was a lot of guesswork. It was a lot of praying and hoping and dreaming that this is right, right? These pivot tables and these spreadsheets, this is accurate, right? And the truth is, they're never accurate. By the time you get to the end of the sheet, everything above it's broken. So it's really nice to have that capability.
Um, I am hearing you speak on that. It makes me think of really what are the metrics then that are available? What is more beyond just the remediation factor, but what else is available through the Sevco integration?
Yeah, so for example, I might find out that when Mandy gets a set of issues to resolve, she takes care of him 48 hours. When Brian does, it takes 3 to 4 weeks. Why is that? Is Brian drinking a lot? Is he just not paying attention? Does he have the wrong tools, the wrong training? What's happening? And what can we do to improve that? What can we do to get everybody, operating as efficiently and effectively as possible? I can also say, look, we have 3,000 issues, but out of those 3,000 issues, here's 30 that I need to take a look at right now. And I can track those. Okay, those have been added to a ticket. Okay, if they are added to a ticket, did it actually also go to source so somebody can remediate it? And kind of look at all those connective properties to ensure that it's not just the discovery of the issue, but actually full circle remediation and measurement on those issues. And that's what people want. They definitely want to know about the problem. They definitely want to resolve it, but they want to know if they're getting better than they were last month, last year in that resolution.
And have you seen the ability to have that information translate into actual stress reduction in the security team or with the CISOs?
Absolutely. And in fact, an interesting one, it definitely helps reduce the stress with the security team, gives the CISOs greater visibility and also that evidence. So when they're going to the board, right, let me step back. If the CFO goes to the board and they're asked how much money's in the bank and their response is, well, we don't really know exactly.
Right.
Security kind of had like a wash for that for a while. They could be
It's
a
true.
little bit assumption based, but now you can be very much evidence based. So now the CISOs love that, right? But also that communication now between IT and security, or even with the audit and compliance team, is so much better because again, you've got all the evidence there. You can track it, and you're just like, look, guys, you resolved 90% of it, great, but why is this 10% still remaining? And it becomes a conversation, and there's less finger pointing, and it's more of it's kind of like the idea of bringing purple and blue teams together to make, or red and blue teams together to make a purple team.
Right.
It's doing the same thing now with security and IT as it relates to asset vulnerability and exposure management.
Beautiful. And I know we have to wrap up, but are there then direct reports from Sevco that are able to be used with the non-technical C-suite level individuals?
Yeah. In fact, we had a customer of ours come by today after the keynote and say, you know what, your product is one of the greatest products that we've bought in the last decade. And let me tell you why we're saying this. It's because when I go into a board meeting with non-technical, non-security individuals, I take a screenshot of the dashboard to actually show what's the state of the state. Right? And we love hearing that from our customers. They always have such awesome use cases and like, oh, you just took a screenshot of the dashboard. That's great. We've got all this great integrated APIs and this and that and that, but the screenshot, that's cool too, right? So it's really interesting to see how they can level that up to the highest levels within the organization, but they can also still get into the technical bits and bytes with the engineers too when they need to.
Oh, that's beautiful. That makes me happy to hear because I love anything that comes with the ability to act as a more effective liaison between the technical and non-technical.
Yes. And that's something that I think every security company should try to address today because security, it's no longer a dark art in a vacuum. It has to be part of the larger risk of the business. Yeah.
Fair. Well, Brian, thank you so much for your time and for sharing more on Sevco. And to all of you tuning in, thank you. And to find all of the Cyber Risk TV coverage on this year's event, please visit securityweekly.com/Sevco ISW.